February 4th meeting of planning and zoning to order. Roll call.
Dale Hughes.
Here.
Guy Lee.
Here.
Harvey Millian.
Here.
Lee Allen Smith.
Here.
Don Bagley.
Here.
Tim Grenke. Don Dorman.
Yeah.
James Lee.
Here.
Mark Mustaine.
Yeah.
We have 8 out of 9 present.
Pledge allegiance. I pledge
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Approval of minutes from previous meeting.
Sent out in your packet. If there are comments, questions, or any errors, I think I've gotten your name right this time. I think the first set I had the chairman's name wrong at some point. I learned slow, but I got it right, I think. So we'll be looking for a motion to approve minutes as written.
I'll make that motion. A motion and a second.
I'll second it.
Have a motion and a second to approve the minutes. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Carries. Proposed voluntary annexation of property by Thomas and Adam.
You have in your packet information related to the proposed annexation by the Pattons. John and Eileen Patton have requested annexation of a parcel of land that's 180 feet deep by 90 feet wide into the city of Centralia. He wants to sell this land as, based on what he's told me, to his grandson Matthew Ingebrigtsen. This piece of property is compact and contiguous as required by state law. We are completely able to provide all services, and in fact, the reason why they're requesting this rezoning or this annexation and then zoning, annexation into the city limits and then zoning, is to receive city sewer. The Pattons have recently annexed a parcel of land at the corner of Fairground Street and North Hickman, which is now being on which now the Cornerstone Baptist Church is building, and this is very similar to that annexation and zoning. We are entirely able to provide the services. We would need at some point to acquire right-of-way to allow Hickman Street to be extended north on its current alignment, so that would actually make the a lot at that point only 150 feet deep, but still it would be this piece of property, if you think of it as a lot, it would still be a viable city lot. So if they built right up to the back of this property, if they platted right up to the back of this property for other lots in the future, we still have something that's plenty large enough to be a city lot, plenty large enough for him to build on this one piece of annexed property a house and keep all the setbacks. We could recommend, if you want, as assuming that that the city would pursue right of way as part of the annexation, but I don't see us building that street, so I think at this point, I don't know if that's necessary at this point. They don't want to annex the rest of the 5.3 acres because they want to have it available for uses that are not permitted in the city. One thing he mentioned was he'd like to still hunt on the land. And therefore, I think this would be, and we're fine with that. I mean, he says he doesn't plan at any time in the near future to build on it or subdivide it, but we need to be prepared just in case. The property of the Pattons, if you see the map behind you there, there's water available at the site. The sewer line, which is, there's like a green flower-looking structure at the corner of Fairground and North Hickman Street. If you remember, those of you on the Board of Aldermen may remember that we entered into an agreement to allow them to extend an 8-inch, what will be, the city will accept as an 8-inch sewer main up to the south end of the Patton's property. I don't know, see if you see the arrow right about here. Inge Britton will be building his house right about here, and they will extend a 6-inch lateral to connect with the 8-inch to serve this particular property. If future development occurs in the Mockbee property or north on the Patton property, that the 8-inch line will have to be extended at that point. But we will be able to serve this property with sanitary sewer. Sewer is also this is a cooperative agreement between the Pattons and Cornerstone Baptist Church to put the sewer in. And the city has inspected it. It's actually in now. It's just been put in the last 2 weeks. So the sewer will be ready. Water is there. It's not going to have any additional burden for police, fire, or sanitation. Staff feels confident the city can supply all services immediately to the property in question. Annexation of the property into the city's limits of Centralia would allow for the provision of the city service and city expansion in an orderly manner. If the commission agrees, that a motion recommending annexation of this property to the Board of Aldermen would be in order.
So moved. Who did the burden of the extension of Hickman Street fall?
It would, assuming there was a subdivision built, well, it would be on the developer. I mean, if the city were to allow lot splits to continue up, then the city would end up probably having to, but actually I think it has to be the developer. I don't think there's any way that the city ends up building Hickman Street.
Well, that's what I was wondering is, I mean, there's a sort of a street there in front of the church, what the church property is.
Right.
There's no provision for us to improve that.
Right.
Is there any requirement that the church improve that? Or is that going to end up being the city's responsibility in the future?
The part in front of the church,
Yes.
we did
That
not
was
make.
not a city street.
We did not make the church do anything when they have not submitted a building permit.
Okay.
We during the I was here when we annexed this. It was the month it was right in that transition. But we did not, as far as I'm aware, correct me if I'm wrong, I didn't see any requirements on the church or the Pattons to improve that street as a condition of the annexation or zoning of the property that's now Cornerstone Baptist Church.
Right. But they also bought other land, which technically was a subdivision.
Right.
You know, but we haven't required them. They haven't submitted a subdivision plat. Do they have to do that, and are they required to improve the street? Then the question on this one is now we're going to approve something else, or is the city taking on an obligation here to build a street, which I don't think we ought to be doing.
I would say based on our existing policy, that when we went over with Board of Aldermen recently, that if we are accepting any responsibility to build a street, it would be to build a minimal qualified street, which is something that would the next. But see, there was a North Star subdivision.
Right.
That was in the county. What was it? I'm
But it was not in the city.
correct.
And what the church bought is more than that.
Mm-hmm.
So they have additional land that was not properly subdivided. I just don't want the city to be under the obligation to extend, to build a nice new street out there for people.
Right.
when I think it should be the property owners that pay for the street out there.
I think if we can't do it by being inconsistent with what we require everybody else.
You know, and if we keep approving these lot splits like this and saying, well, okay, we'll let you buy, at some point, people are gonna come back and say, where's my city street? And I don't want us to be in the position of having to fork over several $100,000 to build a street out there. And, I mean, I don't object to him annexing, I just don't want the city to be obligated for a street.
Right, right. And as far as the Cornerstone Baptist Church, I mean, I guess I don't have an answer off the top of my head whether or not they're building on technically two parcels of land.
Right.
But there is not a subdivision, a commercial subdivision. Or
Other than the
residential.
fact that it wasn't in the city before and they didn't buy all of the property, the city only annexed part of it without a subdivision plat,
Right.
which I don't have a real problem with, other than, you know, I think maybe they ought to come back with a subdivision plat and provide for, you know,
Well, and we don't have the building permit yet, so that would be, I guess, the time when we have to make a decision as to, or staff, I guess, has to make a decision as to whether we're gonna say this requires a subdivision plat, and therefore you're gonna have to build the street. I don't think Cornerstone Baptist Church is anticipating they're gonna have to build the
I
street.
would suspect that's probably correct.
And
But I don't want the city
even
to
if
be
they
obligated
did,
for it.
wouldn't the Green Gables property, you know, they also adjoin the street, but they're not accessing it.
But they're not accessing it. So it was not required that they do anything because it was not part of their tract.
No, we'll consult with our lawyer when he's not on camera. About whether or not that,
When you say build a street, are you referring to something more than the blacktop that's already there?
Yes,
You're talking curb and gutter and
curb
all
and
that?
gutter, I mean,
Right.
if they do something, they're supposed to do it to the current city standards.
That's if they build a subdivision.
yeah, but do they have to have they're not subdividing the land per se.
Well, he is, he's not annexing all of his property. So he's doing a de facto subdivision by only annexing, a portion of his property to the city.
You mean this one that we're talking about today?
Yes, and Cornerstone basically did the same thing. They
fall
bought
in-
all of North Star subdivision, but they also bought other land, so they were not,
Fall right into the same deal.
yep.
Well,
So they were doing a de facto subdivision, the city just did not, and I didn't have any problem with it then as far as us annexing it, I have a problem with the city accepting an obligation to build a street. Because we don't really have the funds to do that,
no,
and if we do that, then somebody else is not going to have the funds to
and
do
at some
overlays or something else.
point, if the Mockbees came in tomorrow and said, we're gonna annex and we're gonna subdivide, we're gonna do everything by the rules, they would not be required to build a street up to their property.
That's correct. And so now the city, who's gonna be responsible for doing the infill?
Right.
And that's the problem with some of these lot splits is, you know, you keep doing lot splits and all of a sudden now the city's stuck with the cost of, improving the street. And I don't think that's what ought to happen.
So we need to come up with some kind of, we need to address this with the Pattons and Mr. Ingebrigtsen, and particularly Cornerstone Baptist Church, who's gonna be coming to us with a building permit pretty soon.
I think it needs to be addressed, yes.
And see what expectations are and see what, I mean, if they're happy with the street they've got, is everybody happy for now? If they want, I mean, can we be happy with that? Because that's not really a city, even if they're happy with it, can the city be happy with it? And that's, I
I'm not
really,
sure.
it's
I'm not
rhetorical.
sure, I think we would be.
I suspect at some point they're gonna want us to improve that street for them.
at some point it's gonna have to have storm sewer drain and gutter.
I kind of agree with you, but we got a whole bunch of streets in this whole part of town that are without curb and gutter.
That's
Yeah.
correct.
That's right.
I mean, what was
But we
Cornerstone?
want to continue the problem.
Right. Was
And-
Cornerstone asked to build a street when they moved in? When they annexed the property?
I don't think they
I mean, they didn't annex the property, I realize, but they were the contract purchaser when the annexation.
Yeah, I don't think they,
Well, they
My
weren't asked to,
recollection
but
is-
yeah.
the question is are they obligated to? I mean, they haven't got a building permit yet, and the question is should they do a proper subdivision plan when they do that? Because, I mean, they really did a de facto subdivision, because they didn't annex all of the property that was owned by the people they bought from. They only bought a portion of it.
Right.
Is that circumventing our regulations? And I kind of think it might be. I don't have any problem with annexing, I just have a problem with us accepting the obligation of improving the street in the future
Right.
when we shouldn't. Because our whole policy is that all new streets have to be built to standards. And we've even gone back and said, if you're adjacent to an existing street, you've got to improve that for curb and gutter.
By the same token, if we then told I mean, if we told the Cornerstone Baptist Church that they need to build that, even if we went with 28 feet wide, which would be very narrow I mean, Hickman Street in the year 2025 might be a much higher traffic street. I guess that's only 9 years away. Say 2035.
Or 2050.
Not the year 25, 25.
I was thinking for it then.
No, it's okay. Not yet. Let's wait till we get there. Is that, we may want a 36-foot wide collector type street there.
Well, we've only got a 50-foot right of way, so I doubt we're gonna get a 36-foot street.
Dream on, we can dream. But, so even a 32-foot wide street there is gonna be a huge burden for that church.
Yeah, there's no way.
I mean, it would stop their plans.
Yes.
And at this point, I don't think I mean, I understand what you're saying, and I'm not gonna say you're wrong. In fact, you're right. But by the same token, if that's the right answer, how do we let them get annexed and purchased? I mean, I guess the question is, should we let them put the sewer in if we weren't gonna expect them to build the road?
Sewer is a different situation. I mean, like I say, I'm not opposed to their annexation at all. I'm just opposed to the city accepting the obligation of having to build that road in the future.
Okay.
Because all of our policies right now, and planning and zoning rules require that it's up to the developer to do that. We've required other developers to do that. Boyd Harris is obligated to do all of Columbia Street in front of his subdivision. Darren Adams had to pay for, or at least his,
half of Adams.
had to pay for half of Adams Street and half of Lakeview.
Yeah,
And then there's an escrow account for.
There's an escrow account for Lakeview.
right.
So, are we letting these people off the hook? And I'm not sure that we should do that. Why are we treating people differently?
Is that something they could develop an escrow account for and build it in the future?
The problem with that is that you put money in there and you don't spend it, and the cost of street construction keeps going up.
Right.
And so you put
Yeah,
$10,000 in there, and 10 years from now, $10,000 isn't gonna buy $10,000 worth
Right.
of streets today.
Right.
I mean,
But
I
there's,
think we need to address this issue and discuss, and decide what we're going to do, because I kinda look at it as we're treating people differently here than what we've treated some of the other people in the past. Darren Adams on his subdivision down there, he paid for the improvement, or he's putting escrow money in on Gamble Chance.
yeah.
We've required it of other people, why are we not requiring it here? Annexing is one thing.
Yeah.
What our city's obligation is a completely separate issue.
This is probably a discussion we should have had back then, but.
It probably
It is not 100% clear though, is this is a I mean, because there's terms like major subdivision, minor subdivision, lot split. What is this? What's
Well, the
happening
purpose
here?
of the lot split is not to circumvent the subdivision regulations. And if they're circumventing the requirement for a street, then I kind of question whether we should allow a lot split. I mean, we're doing a subdivision out there if we annex this separately from the remainder of the property. It's a de facto subdivision because he'll be able to sell this piece separately.
Even though it's one lot.
It is one lot, but if he wants to come in and sell off that piece that's in the city, he falls under different rules than if he wants to sell off what's in the county.
Right.
And the county would let him survey the remainder as one piece and with no rules and no requirement for subdivision because that's what's in the county.
Are there different classifications though? Mark, you mentioned a few different terms there. Does the city code have different classifications?
Yes. Yeah, for minor subdivision, this would definitely be either, I mean, if it was a piece of land existing in the city, and if there were a street already there, it would definitely be allowed to be a lot split. We've had similar done on Walnut, Howard Burton, you know, we've had lots of little lot splits done. Now, when there isn't much in the way, if there isn't adequate infrastructure, we have had some requests recently, and we have, for instance, on Stone and Brick Street, Dave Peebler has built a house there, and I allowed him to build, while he's proposing to do a lot split and put in road, but only a rock road as opposed to a current city street, because he's not asking to do a subdivision, he's asking to put one more lot there inside streets that are already platted. Now, there is not a platted street here, so this is a little different. But one house lot is not unusual to do a lot split. This would probably be more appropriate for a minor subdivision, where you would have one legal lot. Usually 3 to 5 lots is, I can't remember what the 5 is the maximum for a minor subdivision. When you subdivide land, the idea is that you're then preparing it for sale, and you take on responsibilities to provide infrastructure. Since the 1980s, 70s, whenever we started requiring, back in the day, back when Dan Mardale was platted, where Ivy Street, etc. is, the city put in the streets. But more and more cities had been turning to asking the developers to put in the streets as they develop. And that's been that rule since I don't know when.
And the difference was back then, you had a motor grader out there and you graded ditches and you put rock on it and you were done.
Yeah.
But now as you go to hard surface and curb and gutter, the cost of streets is such that, you know, the city can't really afford that obligation. But it does increase the value of the lots tremendously, and so the developer has been put on developers.
So who
That's different
determines?
everywhere.
If you guys have on your microphones, there's a little red light. So this is being recorded. So if I get when I go back, if I want to capture some of this stuff, I'm not getting verbatim notes. But if you guys can push that so we can get it recorded, I'd appreciate it. But
So who determines then whether it's a lot split or?
that's
minor?
staff. That's basically me.
Okay, because it would seem reasonable to me that, okay, we vote whether or not to allow annexation, and then when you let them, they would have the opportunity to, I guess, when you tell them what the classification is, whether or not that they would want to proceed forward with it. Then, but you'd have to give them like the road requirements and things like that.
Well, actually, I guess the place where it really trigger it is at the point of asking for a building permit. But we should
But
probably
they should
let
know
them know
ahead of
now.
time. Yeah, they should know ahead of time.
I agree.
I think
And they
it's
should disclose it to anyone that they sell the property, may sell the
Right.
property to in the future.
Right.
So you don't run into what maybe the church might be,
facing.
Right.
yeah, facing in the near future.
Well, they definitely need to know that before the Board of Aldermen votes to annex.
Right.
Yeah.
Now, does this, does it, the dirt right now that runs up to this property, or what's the?
Well, it's a,
Blacktop Street.
yeah, it's a rough blacktop
Yeah,
street.
it's cold, probably was Cold Nick Street.
Yeah, and then,
And it's
but
not
it's,
very wide.
and then, yeah, it's 16 feet wide, I think. And then but even that stops at the south end of this piece that we're annexing now. It's basically, there was a trailer there, and the city had provided services to it for some time. The
Electric for.
the electric, water, there wasn't no sewer to this before, but, go ahead and take that, that area, anyway, I'm trying to take off, get rid of my, markings here. I was just trying to, but it won't let me. Anyway, so, just got the class on it today and
Just hit navigation
yeah.
and hit pan, and I think, yeah, now it's gone.
Okay, got it. Okay, but so well, there was a I think when this was taken, in fact,
Yeah,
it looks like there was a trailer.
double wide, still there.
Yeah,
Yeah.
so that's where he's going to build the house. But so what restriction do you want me? I mean, we would like to get the 30 feet for the or the 25 feet, I guess it is, for the road.
It'd be 50 feet from the road.
Well, but he can only give us 25 because right now the property ends in halfway through where the road would be. So he can give us 25 feet.
And then when they
The
cross
Monkeys
that-
would have the
I'm
other.
not sure that that's correct.
Well,
According to the survey it is, but I thought that they owned to the other side of it. Because, see, Green Gables never came out into that, what would be a street there at all. And they never accessed it, and so they weren't required to do anything at that point.
I was going by the survey.
Well, you can't
But-
trust those things.
So I've heard.
Oh, yeah.
Some people just put anything there. I'm glad everybody reads the card.
But I mean, you can look at it on the assessor's map, and you can see that Green Gables, all of that street, none of that street came off of Green Gables. That was,
This is the assessor's map that Don is talking about. Pan over just a little bit. You can see Hickman Street, and yeah, from the assessor's map, it does look like
Yeah.
the full width of the street, the alignment of the street would be on the property here.
and I know that Green Gables, because I surveyed it, no right-of-way was given from Green Gables at all. The right-of-way was already existing.
So there is some street right of way.
In front of North Star subdivision, I believe.
Yeah.
But there's really no dedicated right-of-way beyond that point.
Beyond, right, once you get to Tom's house. That lot.
So it was only this little piece down there in the corner that, not all of the Cornerstone property has dedicated right-of-way on it. At least I don't believe it does. It doesn't that I'm aware of.
Does the right of way go all the way up to where that yellow is?
No.
The so-called
think so.
street right of way that you're, or does it stop at a smaller lot?
Yeah, no, you're right, it does. It appears to.
And the Cornerstone bought the property, I mean, it's the small corner plus the L shape there. Is that what they own?
Does Cornerstone own all of this?
That's,
Yes.
So
and they stopped
there should
right,
be right-of-way in front of this portion of it, but I don't think there was any right-of-way dedicated up there. Not that I know of, and I'm not saying there's not, I just don't know of
shows
it.
it right there. And that's what, isn't that what that's showing?
Well, it does show, yeah, because the Cornerstone does own this piece, and the right-of-way does seem to include some of the back of the yards of Green Gables. Now, these
But now
maps
there
are
is-
overlaid,
Yeah, I know, there's a jog there, and I'm not sure,
but
And then in front
no
of
right-of-way.
Tom's house, there's no right of way.
There's no right of way.
That's not
And
a city street.
And then this is where the property, and actually, if Hickman Street would keep going, it would, we'd have to realign Hickman Street slightly to keep it
Centered.
centered, yeah, because it's kind of leaning to the west.
Yeah.
So, getting back to the issue at hand. We have annexation, and I don't know if we've actually opened and closed the public hearing, or this is pre-opening, closing the public hearing, but we have the issue of annexation, and then make a recommendation to the Board of Aldermen, and then we have the issue of zoning. You may make a motion that includes a recommendation.
Under the assumption that we open the public hearing, should we close the public hearing?
Sure. Go ahead.
Need a motion. Correct?
No.
You're the chair.
You're the chair. Yeah.
Seeing no one in the audience, I think it's safe to say that you
Close the public hearing. So that moves us on to 5, 4, 5.
or 5D.
Yeah. Zoning proposed voluntary annexation by Thomas and Eileen Patton. Open public hearing. Close public hearing.
So, what Roman numeral are we on now?
We're on 4. We're on 4. It's been so long since Super Bowl 4, and that's how I
I remember Super Bowl 4.
well, I remember who won.
So we need 2 recommendations to the Board of Aldermen, is that what you're telling me?
Well, let's start with the recommendation on the annexation, and we can just sort of follow with our.
We had a motion on the floor at some point, but I think that went away one time.
Well, I didn't get a second, and,
Okay.
you know, procedurally, we should have stopped and asked for a second, but it didn't get a second, so we need a new motion.
Just for information purposes, North Star subdivision shows that a 30-foot right-of-way was dedicated, or what appears to be a 30-foot right-of-way. Depends on what, it's kind of hard to tell what he's showing.
So half of a 60.
Yeah, and then further north, he's showing that there's lot 7 and lot 8 with room between it. Not sure what that means.
Were you looking, which one are you looking on the survey that was
North Star subdivision, yes.
the one in the packet?
No,
Oh, okay. Online.
yeah.
Okay. It's. I'm not gonna. You mean looking at the assessors or the? You mean on the recorder side?
I'm looking on the recorder side, yes.
You want me to try and bring that up, or does anybody want me to try? I can get there, but.
Well, you can bring it up, but it's hard to tell what it shows.
Yeah.
Okay.
Without having the previous surveys, which aren't available online, I'm not sure you can tell a whole lot.
So, that still leaves us at, does anybody want to make a motion to recommend annexing this property? Making a recommendation to the Board of Aldermen to annex this property with a stipulation that or you want to wait till we get the rezoning, or something having to do with the stipulation that there will need to be contribution towards a road when it comes time to build a road.
Well, I certainly don't want the city to accept the obligation of having to build a road.
Right.
That's all I would be interested in, is that the city would be,
Exempt
I
from
mean,
the-
I don't know that there is any obligation, and I don't even think there's any assumed obligation on their part. I don't think they're assuming that the city's gonna do anything for them.
Well, and I realize that.
It's just, that's somewhat of an assumption of mine though, too. So, but
But what I don't wanna do is end up with a situation is, 15, 20 years down the road, all of a sudden says, well, why isn't the city improving this street for us? We pay our taxes.
Yeah.
All they wanted was sewer. Isn't that right? Is that the only thing that they want, only reason they wanted to be annexed was for the sewer?
Right, yes.
And they're installing that themselves. At their.
Well, the pads contributed to the extension of the 8-inch line to
Right.
their property,
Yeah.
which is already in the city limits.
I mean, I guess the real question is that really a city right of way there, now? They have an obligation at this point to do anything. I'm not trying to hold up their annexation, I really don't object to them annexing.
No, I'm with you, I don't object to the annexation, but I think that they might not want to if they understand what the code says.
Somewhere or another with the annexation, there needs to be a stipulation or change of the information so that they understand that they're gonna be obligated to
Improve the street.
improvements
So, at some point.
at some point. Yeah,
But not in the course.
So you're thinking that they need to build a curb and gutter street?
well, they need to
That's our
follow
requirements presently.
follow what our president,
For a subdivision?
yeah.
Well, the Ingebrigtsen,
And
Well, see, that's the thing.
that's what I would
They
like,
need to
is
know
someone
what's-
that
Yeah, they need to know
is
what
an
the zoning is.
absolute definite, yes, this is a subdivision, or no, it's not.
Well, I mean, when you,
Not de facto or whatever, it just, it seems more like lot splits to me.
well, it is, but the whole thing about a lot split, you're not supposed to do lot splits to circumvent the subdivision regulations. And it says that very clearly in there, that the purpose of it is not to circumvent, and you're not allowed to circumvent the subdivision regulations by doing a series of lot splits.
well, in the issue, the amount of frontage
How
that
do
the
we know
Ingebrigtsens would
intent?
have
That's
is
right.
minute, and there would be no reason for them to build even if they said, okay, we'll build you a 28-foot wide concrete street, it would not connect to anything. And that's the only property before us tonight. The problem is that we have already annexed the Pattons and what is now Cornerstone Baptist Church without any stipulation as to how the road was going to be extended.
Which,
That doesn't mean we couldn't require it, because they could be required to turn that subdivision plat, it's just never been addressed. They've never asked, and I don't know what the answer is, I just don't want us to be obligated to do that, and I suspect that at some point, they're gonna want us to do that.
somebody is.
Somebody is, and I suspect those church members, they're gonna, when that road starts falling apart after they have their construction vehicles out there and everything, they're gonna want the city to repair that and bring it up to standard so that they have a nice smooth surface to get to their church from. I don't want us to have to be obligated for that.
Who originally blacktopped that stretch? I guess is we did.
The city down to the corner there.
I don't know the answer to that.
It's difficult to really know.
Tommy
When's
would know.
When
He's only owned that about 20 years now. It was,
And that was in
It
there
was solid
long
before
before
the
then. Yeah.
Garrett's were living out there.
Yeah.
Walker and Garrett, who Tommy bought it from.
it's dead.
But again, the issue isn't the annexation, it's the zoning, right? We don't determine what the zoning is when we annex, when we allow annexation. do we?
Yes.
Or we
That's the
do?
second thing.
Oh,
That's the second- that's the next
The second.
Oh, okay, okay.
Well,
I don't have.
But even the
I don't have
annex,
tonight.
even the annexation and the zoning don't determine by necessarily this issue, but it wouldn't be, it would not behoove us to continue to allow people to move in, to annex into the city unless with the, I don't relish the idea of going to the Pattons and the Cornerstone Baptist Church and say, oh, by the way, the right thing to do would be for you to build a street here.
I think we set a precedent with the previous annexations that we need.
Yeah, but I agree, but
Yeah.
But you can't keep. We have to. I think the point is that at some point we have to.
I mean, there's other
but
spots that they like to.
taking your we've already set a precedent. Does that mean when they come in with another lot split,
Yeah.
that we now go ahead and approve it? And
Yeah.
the next lot split, we go ahead and approve it? We've circumvented the subdivision regulations,
Right.
which we're not allowed to do by lot splits.
Right, you don't wanna just lot split forever,
Right.
which someone. could
So I
do
think
if
that
it was
something needs to
allowed.
be made of this, and somebody needs to
Yeah.
be aware of what the situation is. I just have a little bit, I don't have any problem with annexing it, I don't have any problem with establishing zoning on it. I have a problem with the city, being obligated at some point in the future to build a street out there because of the expectations of people. Well, you let that happen, it's your obligation now,
Right.
and I don't want that to be the case.
Right.
So now we need to make sure they're aware that they're gonna have to follow the rules of the subdivision
Well,
and corners.
that's the question of what we do.
I feel like it is
But we can't make the
more clearly define
right.
what we call a subdivision, because
Well, it's, didn't the
I
same
think
thing
it's
that,
clear. I think the
there's a
question is
property
the
on
application.
No Chance Road that was like that. That was one single property and then they built the house next to it and now there's still the third lot that looks like a flagpole and a flag.
Yeah.
And that's the same exact thing that happened on No Chance. And they had they actually split it and the house out in front and then that was split into, I think now those two lots are owned by the same person, but they're at 541 East No Chance Road.
Yep.
That was one huge parcel of land and it is now, like I say, I think that one has kind of been put back into one lot, but it was 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 lots is what it became. And now it's at least still 4.
And the stem lot, I think one stipulation was it had to be a minimum of 50 feet wide, so if they ever tried to do something in the back, there'd be enough room to build because there's still room to split that into additional lots, but there's gonna be a road going back there, there's gonna be,
If they could, right.
right.
Yeah.
But
If someone decided to build more than one house back there or something.
right.
I mean, it's been,
Nothing you wanna share with us right now, or nothing?
Okay.
I mean, I just think that we need to be aware of the situation and somewhere along the line, the decisions are gonna have to be made as who's obligated for what.
Right, well,
Yeah.
and
Because if we don't mention it and we don't do anything about it, I know that sooner or later it'll come back to bite us.
well, let's go with the one possible and not outlandish idea is that the Maccabees or their heirs or successors come back in 10, 15 years and decide, we need another subdivision, a residential subdivision or commercial, whatever it is, in Centralia. Can we annex this to the land? It's contiguous, it's compact, even if it is 80 acres. Now we got a stretch of Hickman Street between Fairgrounds and their property, which is not standard. So how do we go back? And I think what we do at this point is write a letter to those property owners and say, look, we're going to look into this, but one of the things we're considering is that you would be at least half responsible for half the cost of upgrading to a residential street. We decided that we wanted, I understand that we probably don't have enough right of way, but if we decided we wanted to build it to a slightly wider standard, I think the city eats that cost. But maybe, you have the obligation to build half of a 32-foot wide, or what is that? Is our standard?
32-foot wider standard.
Yeah, our standard, 32-foot wide curb and gutter street. At the time of the subdivision land to the north. That's what we're going to expect of you. Now the Pattons I feel the worst for, because they've been in for a while and no one ever. I don't know. I can't speak for everything that's been said to them.
Yeah.
Cornerstone, we probably should have said something a year and a half ago, but we didn't. But Lenny Ingebrigtsen know that but we're talking about in front of his house.
Well, I'm not sure we ought to do anything with the street up there, except right away or anything, at this point. Just let him know that in the future, that's gonna be a problem, and he's gonna have to deal with it.
Right. Right. But his problem is dollar figure much smaller than Cornerstone Baptist Church. Because of the amount of frontage.
I mean, if
well, Tommy Patton's frontage.
If we annex this-
Cornerstone.
Right.
Yeah.
and then he wants to sell this off separately, then I think he ought to extend the street through the lot to get to the rest of it. Because he would be doing a subdivision at that point, and if he doesn't, he's blocking access to future land, which he still owns. So, take the street up to his line, and don't worry about it from that point on. It's his problem at that point in the future.
So we accept the mistakes we've made so far.
No, I didn't say that. I'm not sure what we did with that, with Cornerstone. I'm saying that we don't have to deal with whether or not he's obligated for a street. We don't have to accept any right-of-way on the property that he's trying to annex, and it will be his problem to extend the street in the future to access the rest of the property.
As long as he's aware of the fact that that's gonna be part of the,
It's part of his lot, and it's not a city street.
right,
And to access any land beyond there is gonna be his problem to put a road there.
Well, what if it's the Mockbees on the other side of the street that want to annex?
Then they need to work with,
They
him
need to
to
work
do
it.
that.
Just, we need to make them aware of this situation.
Yeah.
But I mean, I think we can annex him without causing any problems. We're not gonna accept any street up there, any obligation for a street. We're not even going to accept right-of-way for a street, because that might obligate us in the future.
So just the opposite, don't ask for right of way until it comes time.
And the street will end at his property, I mean, that's the end of it.
and the obligation will fall to him if there's future development.
Yeah.
And with the Mockleys,
Yes. Or whoever owns that land.
Yeah, and their heirs and successors, et cetera,
Yeah.
so,
Just make the developer.
So how do you want that motion worded?
now, I still think we're gonna have to deal with what we do with the church, but
Yeah.
I don't think that's our question tonight.
Yeah, that's right, it's not for tonight's meeting. So do you want to, take a stab at phrasing that, motion? Anybody? Anybody?
I'd make a motion for the annexation, subject to information being transferred to them concerning street obligations,
Future street obligation.
future street obligations.
And further, that we are not accepting right-of-way on that piece?
Right.
We're not asking for.
We're not asking for,
Not asking for right of way.
Right away.
asking or accepting.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
And then we'll go after the Baptists. Then we'll go after the Pattons and the Baptists. The Cornerstone Baptists.
It's okay.
So we have a motion on the floor.
So that Don Bagley moved that we approve the annexation, recommend approval of the annexation to the Board of Aldermen, subject to the condition that information will be transferred to the owner regarding the future obligations for street construction, and that the city is not asking for or accepting any right-of-way on that property.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? The recommendation passes. Now we're at 5.
So at this point, they would almost just be like a shared driveway for them.
pretty much.
Two properties shared driveway.
Correct.
So for legality, they would almost have to put, one property would have to ask for an easement across the other property.
Well, there's a de facto easement there now.
Yeah.
Yeah, they're both owned by the
There's no
same
lot.
person, aren't
Well, right now they're owned by the same person, but the idea would be send it sell to his grandson.
they?
Yeah, if Ingebrigtsen sells it to somebody else who's not related, and then then they'll be back here.
All right.
Yeah.
You need to open
Yeah.
public hearing for number 5, is that correct?
Yeah.
Zoning of property proposed voluntary annexation by Thomas Snyder.
Sure, this can be straight.
All right.
Close public hearing.
Just want to read my I relied on my computer and didn't keep it plugged in. Annexation of the property that's back in my office, I didn't want to interrupt. The property requires zoning that we establish zoning on the property as well, keeping with the property recently annexed and the adjacent property. The property owners have asked for B2 zoning. Staff feels that B2 is reasonable land use designation for this property. It is currently zoned RS in the county, and the comprehensive plan of 1987 suggests, as close as I can tell, there's a swath of commercial right at the corner. Then there's a thin strip of residential, and then north of that is industrial in terms of future annexation. So this would be somewhere between residential and industrial and close to business. So the B2, I think, is close enough fit to the comprehensive plan, which is a little outdated anyway. So commission agrees that this is reasonable, and a motion recommending B2 zoning to the Board of Aldermen would be in order.
Why not make it just residential, R1? That's, you know, future building on the property would be R1 anyways. I mean, they're not gonna put a business back in there, no one's gonna find them.
At this point, that would almost be a spot zone, though, because there's no R1 around it.
Well, it's residential single family in the county. So I don't think that, I don't know, when you're talking about that small of a property, I guess, you know, the contiguous, you could, either way, I think you could say would be, I don't think either one would be a spot zone. The lack of in an ideal situation we have, that's one of the reasons why updating the comprehensive plan would be useful, especially for the land use. They requested
I think we solved a lot
B2.
of problems if it was all one, if they annexed everything, rather than trying to do one piece. But that's not what the request is.
Right. Well, and the reason because they want the sewer, but they don't want our city ways. He wants to be able to hunt on the property.
I realize that.
And keep animals and things. I'm not sure that all the things he
I would
wants.
imagine that'd be the main thing, is their barn, they have their, there might be enough acres for the city code,
There's over 5,
Okay.
so I'm thinking they might be able to.
But there would be a limited number, I'm not sure to make it.
Right, you have to, based on the square feet of lot and all that, and you can have so many animals of this type and that type and that
Right.
type, and you don't wanna have, like I said, I don't wanna have to deal with that.
That's keeping animals. His intention is to live on it as a farm for the rest of his life.
Right. The Cornerstone Church property, was it zoned as B2?
It was.
Yeah, we rezoned it B2 till they could build a church in it.
Yeah, I don't know that you would have to rezone it B2 to build a church on it, but the intensity of the use would be, and it's right across from the fairgrounds.
Yeah.
Or you build a church on R1.
Right.
You pretty much build a church on any,
Yeah.
So would there be another classification for, branch farm?
We do not have an agricultural zone in the city of Centralia.
R1. Is agricultural.
I'm sorry.
Agricultural is R1.
yeah, but we don't have an agricultural designation.
Yeah, there's not A1 zone. I think Columbia used to. I think they still have
I
an
think they still do. I think all property in Columbia automatically comes in as A1 unless they request otherwise.
Yeah. Which is odd because sometimes it's, although they, anyway. So, the RS is the zoning, as best I can tell from the map on this current property, but I'm pretty certain that's right. Which is residential, single family in the county. I don't know, they requested B2, I don't know if they removed their request. I don't know that it's gonna really make that much difference to him. What he's proposing would be consistent with an R1 zoning. You know, it's a recommendation. If you guys recommend, trying to remember if is there any supermajority required if the council goes against a recommendation?
I believe so.
You would force a supermajority of the council if you recommend R1, and the Pattons felt strongly about having a B2.
Hey, when it B2, would that inhibit future residential building beyond it?
No, in fact, you could build a house on B2, and we have many houses built on. We have some even built in. I think a few houses that are built in industrial zones.
Yeah, I was thinking more if somebody built something back there, highway business of some sort, whatever it might be, on B2, would that interfere with residential coming in? In other words, giving them the right to do something like that might interfere with future residential building beyond.
I wonder if R1 isn't the better choice at this point. I wouldn't have any objection to going to B2 at a later date, but I just kind of wonder about right now considering its use.
That's the way I am. I lean toward R1.
I just think that they're asking for B2 and it's contiguous with what's there already. I don't know why you not give them what they're asking for.
Well, just because with the possibility of building on, putting a housing addition in there, why not just leave it just make it R1?
But we're talking about what is the size of this annexation?
It is 90 feet wide, 180 feet deep. And if
You're talking about a 90 by 180 foot piece of property. And there's not going to be a subdivision in 90 by 180 feet
Yeah.
to do anything really else with. Because Tom Patton's property, it's already annexed in at B2, correct?
correct.
The church is one property that was annexed in at one time, it's B2. Tom's, where his house sits.
Well, Tom's is first, and then we had
Right.
a donut hole, and then we filled that
Yeah.
in.
Yeah, it went leapfrog a little bit and then come back, and now you're just talking about this little rectangle. Sounds like. Guess that would make a difference too on type of
Yeah, I don't
type
think-
of at-home businesses and things like that, though. There are different things allowed, B2 versus R1
Oh, yeah.
for an in-home business. I
Oh,
would
well,
assume it would be less restrictive in B2,
in B2 you can.
or it
have
wouldn't even have to be called an in-home, at-home, or whatever
Right.
business, it's just
Right.
business.
Right, the zoning determines what what the permitted uses are,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
The structure, you can open a restaurant and make it look exactly like a house, and in B2 you'd be fine. And if you did it in R1, you would not, regardless of what the structure actually looked like. There are other things you have to consider, wiring, et cetera, but in terms of the outside structure, you
Right.
can make it look just like a house.
Yeah. Considering the location, not B2.
I mean, admittedly, it's based off an old comprehensive plan, but to me, testimony to the validity and the value of that comprehensive plan is how long it has lasted.
Mm-hmm.
And if we're gonna go and now limit what would be a possible extension of that comprehensive plan, I don't know, it just didn't make sense to me. Especially since that's what they asked for, was a B2.
Yeah.
And there's no one here from the public
Yeah.
other than right here on the board. I mean, there's not like a full auditorium here of people saying, don't give them this.
Yeah.
Staff recommended B2.
Principally, yeah. I mean, it's
Mm-hmm.
much like what Mr. Mustaine was saying, this piece, these are very good discussions. And maybe, and one of the places to have this particular discussion is in the revision of the comprehensive plan. this piece of property, this B2 piece of property, it wouldn't even be big enough to put a convenience store on, which would be allowed by itself, I don't think. But it would have to be a very
Not
small
much of one, yeah.
Yeah, not one that's viable in the modern world, not one that's been. So, I mean, I guess you could put a small restaurant or something possibly on it, barely get enough parking, I think. So, I think everything you guys have said, good reasons for making it R1 are valid. I don't know that it will make, I think he's proposing to put an R1 use on it. And I have no idea if you would rescind his proposal if we put that on it. He asked for B2. He's ready to build a house, bring it into the city. You do have the authority at some point in the future. It is a legislative decision, and within certain reason, you have the authority, the ability to downzone a piece of property. If you can prove that you're not really going to take away any of his, the worst case scenario, someone could argue that it is a taking because he had more, you have a bigger bucket of rights, and you made a smaller bucket of rights by saying it's going to restrict it to R1. But this is a legislative decision by this board, and you have a lot of leeway in how you can zone a property. So by naming it B2 doesn't mean that if Mach B builds as residential and everything to the north eventually residential, that you couldn't downzone this to R1 at some point.
Recommend approval to the board.
Right, yeah, this is all recommendation to the board. Those are all possible long-term outcomes. It's a very good discussion. Unfortunately, the 90 by 180 is probably not going to make one difference all that much either way.
Mm-hmm.
Staff recommended B2 because that was the request. And City Manager 101 is if somebody wants to annex into your city, you try and you take it unless it's a huge problem, because otherwise you get gaps, you get service provision problems. Although the street issue is very important, the zoning to me is not nearly as important. That's why, I mean, it's going to be an R1 use. If we zone a B2, the only problem is that, yeah, if they had an in-home business, their neighbors couldn't complain about it. If that kind of gets folded into a subdivision 20 years from now. The quickest way to annexation is to zone a B2.
I want to make a recommendation that we, make a motion that we recommend to the Board of Aldermen to zone this piece of property being annexed and zone to B2. And then, at the, open hearing, they can come and fight it one way or another if they want. Folks want to. So.
Second.
A motion and a second, all those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Proposed to increase the fees assessed for appeal on the Board of Adjustment.
I'm going to try to make this one go real fast. We've already done this. The ordinance I drafted had only the first paragraph of this section. Therefore, all the other pieces of the ordinance that are on page 2 were essentially deleted from the city code. So it only dealt with the fees. It left out all the rest of the procedure for appeal. So I'm recommending that I'm recommending that this commission recommend approval of this amendment to restore the rest of the chapter. You guys already said, hey, $100 is reasonable. The board already said, yes, we agree. The recommendation for the Board of Adjustment was for $100. It's only probably less than half the cost. It's about a third the cost to hold one of these, not mentioning staff time, and hopefully, and that's today, when this is, anyway, so there's no reason not to move forward. We've already basically done this.
I make a motion that we recommend to the Board of Aldermen that we reinstate the parts of the code that were, did that reinstate or?
Recommend approval of the ordinance
Approval
as
of the
drafted.
ordinance as drafted.
I'll second that.
Have a motion and a second, all in favor? Opposed?
The ordinance does need to be revised to say that the previous ordinance is to be repealed. I think that's part of the recommendation.
We can amend the ordinance.
It's, the first whereas clause has a place vote of X to X.
Well, this board does not, the commission doesn't actually adopt ordinances, so that would be filled in.
To recommend to the board.
Yeah.
So we can fix the actual language when it's just the
Before the vote.
All right. Comprehensive plan process update. I'm going to just go really quickly. We've talked we're working on a partnership with Mid-Missouri Regional Planning Commission to staff a process much like what I've described before. I think that I think issues of land use and maybe catching some of those when things trickle into the city or people add lots here and there, ways to catch the past, the past, well, not even mistakes, but the changes over time. And one of the things we talked about in the Board of Aldermen was is there a statute of limitations on if you don't do, like Campbell Street? At this point right now, Darren and Adams can build houses on Campbell Street, and there's a rock road there. Do we say you've got 5 more years to build on Campbell Street, or you're going to have to put in a road? I mean, Darren Adams is going to throw some houses just so he didn't have to, or whatever. But I can't think of anything else like we have like that. But if somebody were to come in with a subdivision in 2016 standards and didn't build it until 2025, and the standards have changed, I mean, do we want to establish some sort of sunsetting on, if you don't build it within 5 years of adoption of a change, then you have to build it by the new rules? Of course, that's tough to track, or something like that. Those are the sort of discussions we can have. The other part I want to see come out of a comprehensive plan is to develop a public input process towards a full capital improvement program. So we start making decisions in the public bodies that set priorities for large projects like Randolph Road versus $100,000 for a storm sewer under Hubble that is deteriorating. So, that kind of thing. Something where there's a review by the community. In the end, staff is going to have a huge impact on that, and we have, and that's fine. But have a development of a process that's a little more public. That's it. That's all I want to say. More than I thought I was going to say.
Anything else?
Motion in order?
Think so.
I move we adjourn.
I'll second. Motion and a second, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed?
You did.